Today we're going to continue with Chapter 1 in Geometry. We're looking at Section 1.2. So today we are going to be classifying angles by size, and then we are going to recognize congruent angles and segments. So once again, we are going to continue by looking at more vocabulary, looking at any specific notation that goes along with that vocabulary, as well as then doing some practice problems. So these vocab words are just as important as the very first lesson where we are starting to get the foundation of geometry, which once again, remember, is just like a language. And so it's very important that we know these vocabulary words. So an acute angle, it is an angle whose measure is between 0 degrees and 90 degrees. Okay, I'm sure you guys have heard about acute angles in the past. Now, pictures are going to have angles that look pretty small. So we can never really assume what the size of an angle is, and that's something that we'll talk more about in the future. But angles that are small looking, like this picture right here, this would indicate an angle that is in between the measure of 0 and 90 degrees. Now, there's no specific notation for us to identify an acute angle, so I'm going to leave that last box blank. We have obtuse angle. An obtuse angle is an angle whose measure is between 90 degrees and 180 degrees. Okay, so this angle is definitely much bigger. So something that looks like this. This is a very big looking angle. I'm going to call this angle DEF. Okay, much bigger than 90, smaller than 180, but some measure in between. This would represent an obtuse angle. Once again, there is no specific notation for an obtuse angle, so I'm going to leave that last box blank. A straight angle is an angle who measures 180 degrees. Okay, so it's exactly that measure. And so anytime we see an angle that's 180 degrees, we would say that it is a straight angle. So notice that my picture right here looks an awful lot like a line. All right, and that's what a straight angle is as well. Notice that you have to have 3 points on this picture that looks like a line in order for us to classify it as an angle. Notice that in the middle, H is that point. That would be considered the vertex of this angle. So I would call this angle GHI or angle IHG. Okay, so you have to have 3 points in order to consider it a straight angle. If there's just 2 points, then I would just call it a line. But it has to be nice and straight. It measures 180 degrees. Once again, no specific notation for a straight angle. A right angle is an angle whose measure is 90 degrees. So exactly that. So 90-degree angles look something like this. Okay, if I call this J, K, and L, this would be a 90-degree angle. And so there is a specific notation for us to identify a right angle. When we have something that looks like this, to know it is absolutely a right angle, if it's not told to us, you would have to have this box inside. So this box indicates a 90-degree angle. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this picture. I have to have a box inside. If I was not told that it's a right angle, I need that box to know that it is indeed a 90-degree angle. Congruent. Congruent angles are angles that share the same measure. So congruent, we can think of a lot like the word equal. Equal, something that we've been talking about since the beginning of math. When we were taking and solving an equation, we put two things equal to each other. So congruent is very similar to that. So angles that share the same measure, we say we have congruent angles. So a picture would be if I have this angle, let me call this angle MNO, And then I have a second angle. I'm going to call this angle PQR. So say I have these two angles. In order for me to know that these are in fact congruent, that they have the same measure, we would have to have been told that they're the same measure. Like we'd have to be told angle MNO is 50 degrees and angle PQR is 50 degrees. Okay, we do have a notation. So here I'm going to write my angle MNO. N's in the middle because that's the vertex. This is the symbol for congruent. Notice that there is an equal sign and there's this little tilde above it. So this symbol right here represents the word congruent. Okay, so that word right there, or that symbol, represents the word congruent. Okay, so anytime we see that, we can think equal. So if I see this, PQR, so angle MNO, then that symbol for congruent, and angle PQR. So there's my notation to indicate that they are indeed the same measure. Another way for me to look at it, if I didn't have that notation, if I look at my picture and I see something like this, if there's this specific mark inside at the vertex of N, if I have that exact same marking inside the vertex of Q, same marks represent congruence. So when there are marks inside the vertex and they are the same, then we know that the angles are congruent. Okay, so because they both have that little mark inside with that line going through that mark, that means that they have the same mark, and so those angles are the same measure. Congruent segments are segments that share the same length. So say I have this segment, I'm going to call it ST, and then say I have this segment, I'm going to call it segment UV. Okay, if I specifically write segment ST is congruent to the segment UV. So if I see that notation there, that tells me that they are the same length. So they go from the same distance from one point to the same distance on the other. Okay, or once again, I could have specifically given you a length. I could have said that ST, that segment was 2 inches. Well, then that means that the segment UV has to be 2 inches in order for them to be congruent. Or if I have some marks that are the same. So notice I put 2 little tick marks inside of both of those segments. So the same tick marks represent congruence. Okay, there's a lot of different ways you can do tick marks. Here I put 2 little ticks inside. I could have done 1. I could have made it look like a V. I could have made it look like a circle. So I'll kind of show you a bunch of different tick marks throughout the way. But these little marks inside the segment, as long as they are the same, that also indicates us in this picture that they are congruent or the same length.